Hey guys, welcome back to Networking 101 with your host Josh. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the different routing protocols that you can use in your network topology and configurations. We'll be going over RIP version 1 and 2, OSPF, eGRIP, and even DHCP. Along the way, you guys will learn all about how to configure it, and I'll go over the basics of it. So for now, let's get started. For this video, I'll be using a platform called Explain Everything. Now this platform will enable me to show proper configurations of all of these routing protocols. First up, we'll be talking about RIP version 1 and 2. So what is RIP version 1 and RIP version 2? Well, the short answer is RIP stands for Routing Information Protocol, and it's a distance vector interior gateway routing protocol that uses hop count as a routing metric. Now, the maximum number of hops that is allowed for this protocol is 15. However, RIP version 2 was developed to enhance the original RIP version 1. So nowadays you don't really see RIP version 1, it's more RIP version 2 that's being used. So we'll go ahead and talk about RIP version 2. Now, RIP version 1 is a classful routing protocol, and RIP version 2 is a classless routing protocol. Now, I put up a configuration example that you can see here. R1 stands for the router that you'll be using to configure. Now, that first line that you see there, which says configure terminal, that allows you to actually go into the terminal itself, so you'll be able to configure whatever protocol you want. Now, that second line, you'll see where it says R1 parentheses config. That means that you're actually in the terminal to configure it. Now, that command router RIP means that you're implementing the RIP protocol into that router. Now, once you implement that third line, it'll say R1 parentheses config router. Now, that enables you to input what version you want of the RIP. So we want version 2, which is the latest one. So we'll put that one in there. And now the fourth line will be R1 parentheses config router, of course, and then you'll see there where it says network, and then you want to put in the network that you're going to be using for your router. Once you do that, the last line, you're going to go ahead and exit that configuration in there. That last line that you see right there where it says R1 and then show IP protocol, this allows you to see that configuration in your router is showing as RIP, and then version 2 allows you to know that has been implemented into that network. And there you have it. That was the RIP protocol, and now we'll go over the OSPF protocol. Alright, so what is OSPF? So OSPF stands for Open Shortest Path First Protocol. Now, OSPF was created because the need for RIP version 2 was just growing more and more. So this is why OSPF was invented. Now, it is based on a link state technology, and it has concepts such as routing updates, VLSM, which stands for Variable Length Subnet Masks, route summarization, and more. The main differences of RIP version 2 and OSPF is that RIP has a limit of 15 hops, like we talked about, and OSPF has no limitation on the hop count. Also, RIP version 2 can't handle VLSM, and OSPF can, so it's very useful because VLSM allocates IP addresses accordingly, and since RIP version 2 can't do that, it gives shortages in terms of IP addresses in larger networks. So here we have an example of how to configure OSPF onto your network or router. So the first line you see, of course, R1, the router. You get into the config, which is configure terminal. Once you go into the terminal, the second line you'll see router OSPF 100. What that stands for pretty much means that you're enabling your router to become OSPF routing protocol, and that last number 100 is just the process ID. Now, that third line, the router, you'll see the network and then your network plus that other number and then area and then the number. So what that stands for is your network, and then you'll input the network that you want, and then the other IP is a wildcard mask, and you'll learn about that later on, but you're gonna have to put in that wildcard mask right there. And then after that, you're gonna go ahead and put in the area ID for your interface. And then of course, once you do that, the last line, you'll go ahead and put in end, and that'll go ahead and allow your router to have that OSPF configuration implemented. And of course, that last command, show IP protocol, allows you to see that your configuration on your router is now OSPF with all of the right configurations that are set. And there you have it. That was OSPF. Next, we'll go over egrip protocol, and we'll dive in and see how it all works. egrip stands for Enhanced Interior Gateway Routing Protocol, and it's an interior gateway protocol, and it's suited for a lot of topologies and media as well. Now, some of the advantages of having egrip is that it is a very low usage when it comes to network resources. It only sends hello packets on a stable network. Also, when a change occurs, only the routing table changes are occurring, not the actual entire routing table. So this reduces the load for the actual routing protocol itself. Also, egrip is an enhanced distance vector protocol, and it relies on the DUAL, which stands for Diffused Update Algorithm, to calculate the shortest path to a destination that is within its network. Now, this is a configuration example of egrip. Let's say we have 3 routers in play. The first router, we'll go ahead and configure it with line 1. Now, line 2, we go ahead and configure that router with egrip, and that number 90 is the autonomous system number that we'll be using. Now, the third line, we'll put in the network of the other router that we want to talk to, which in this case will have the 172.30.0.0 IP. Now, the next one will be, of course, the wildcard mask. And then the second router that we want to configure would have the IP table of 10.1.0.0, and followed by that would be the wildcard mask. And then we want to exit all of that. Once we do that, we will go ahead and put in our own IP route for this router, which is going to be the 192.168.1.0 IP range, and then we'll have the subnet mask following it. Now, I failed to mention that within that last network that you want to put in there, you're going to put in the no auto summary after all of that. And then, of course, once and for all, you want to use the command show IP protocol to see that the actual router is using egrip. And there you have it. That was the egrip protocol. Next, we'll go ahead and talk about DHCP, and we'll see what that entails. So, what is DHCP? DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Now, this basically assigns all IP addresses that are within the network dynamically. So it automatically assigns each device within the network. You don't have to manually assign an IP address. And usually you would have a server allocating all of those IP addresses dynamically to each of your devices or hosts within the network. And basically you would just create a DHCP pool, which has the following: the network with the subnet mask, the default router or the default gateway that it's known, the DNS servers, and the DHCP options, but of course that is optional. So here we have the configuration example of DHCP on a router. The first line, of course, you configure the terminal to go ahead and get into the config mode. Once you go into there, you're going to go ahead and input IP DHCP pool and then the name of your pool that you want. Now once you do that, the third line, you'll see that you're into DHCP config. Once you're in there, you're going to input your network. So whatever network you want to input in there, you can do that with the subnet mask as well. And then following that, you're going to go ahead and put your default router, your IP for that one. And then once you're done there, you're going to go ahead and do the DNS server as well. And then once all of that is done, you're going to go ahead and exit it, of course. And then you can use the last command, which is show IP protocol, just to see that that router is using DHCP within the network. So there you have it, guys. We talked about RIP version 1 and 2. We talked about OSPF. We've also talked about egrep and DHCP. If you guys like this content, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. And if you guys have any comments, go ahead and drop them down below. It doesn't matter if you have any questions, concerns, I'll go ahead and talk to you guys down there. But again, my name is Josh, and thank you guys for tuning in to this video in Networking 101, and I'll see you guys next time.